Hello, everybody. I hope you're having a wonderful night. I did not get a chance to put out a promo today, and that bums me out, but we'll go ahead and jump into our stories and get things moving. The first one we're starting with is the World Health Organization says gender-affirming care is essential to transgender health.
This is an interesting bit of news that's coming out, because if you don't look at the material correctly, you begin to get the wrong impression. The World Health Organization has just recently been involved in updating their standards of care for transgender people. As early as 2019 is when they removed it from their standards of mental illness. But now they're going and they're looking at what the body of wider research, especially through WPATH, is saying, and they have said that gender affirming care is a necessary part of the ongoing health and wellness of transgender individual people. But the place where this came out was in the Journal of the International AIDS Society.
Ooh.
Now, at first glance, people may be wondering, well, were they somehow talking about the pathology of being transgender? And what it says is no. What they're talking about is that gender incongruence is not a diagnostic tool to pathologize gender dysphoria, but it shares that with the intent of ensuring that gender diverse people have access to dedicated health resources, specifically attention given to gender affirming care such as hormone treatments and surgery. The guidelines stress the importance of national programs establishing and providing gender affirming care or effective linkage and referral to services which can provide such care. Further, the guidelines underscore the importance of recognizing transgender identity in official documents, both as a source of mental well-being and as a way to access dedicated care. One of the things that the WHO points out in their documentation is that only 15 countries allow people to identify as third gender or transgender in official documentation or identification.
Wow, what was that number again?
Only 15 countries.
Wow. Well, that's one of those things that shows you that maybe the U.S. is pretty far ahead.
Well, the sad reality is that the U.S. is not on that list.
Oh, okay. Because as a country, we don't.
Argentina, Austria, Australia, Canada, Colombia, Denmark, Germany, Iceland, India, Ireland, Malta, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Pakistan, and Nepal.
So sad.
So sad.
I guess that's because it's a state by state thing, and the country as a whole doesn't have a policy for that.
Absolutely.
Let's move south here. Mexico's largest state approves same-sex marriage. We've been seeing some advancements across the world of this. What's going on in Mexico now?
The state of Mexico, which is located around Mexico City, is the largest populated state within the country of Mexico. And its legislature voted to recognize same-sex marriage and same-sex common law marriage. And now there are only 3 states left in Mexico that have not made these measures current. And so they're looking at this widespread ability for same-sex individuals to get married, and they're seeing, that this is truly an effort to, reduce inequality and let the country know that, the state of Mexico, right around the capital city of the country is, definitely stepping up to recognize all of its citizens.
Moving over to Ohio, Ohio activists quash an anti-trans resolution in major victory for trans rights. Good. More stuff is being voted down. That's what we need.
So this is coming out of the Ohio State Board of Education, and what happened is they delayed voting on a an anti-trans resolution that would ban trans girls from women's sports, force teachers to out trans students, or ban classroom discussions on LGBTQ issues and subjects in kindergarten through third grade. So this is basically trying to fit, in alignment with President Biden's proposal to update Title IX to include gender identity. It's, also going against so many of the movements right now to try and um, have that proposal overturned at the state level by forcing it into the courts. So Ohio, for whatever reason, is taking that step back, and they're saying we don't know that we want to go ahead with this at this point. And so the state board of education said we're not going to do a vote right now on this.
Okay. So it's less of a well, this is the activists were big behind this, but it sounds more like they might just be delaying this.
It could be a delay, but also there are a couple of court cases, hearings that are happening. In fact, one of the things that didn't make it into today's news because it was, being published today. Today marked opening, um, the opening of the trial for the gender affirming ban in Arkansas. So Arkansas was the first state to ban gender affirming care for minors, and that was pretty much challenged from the very beginning. It was immediately put on hold. A judge upheld that hold, and now the actual hearing regarding whether or not gender affirming care can be taken away from minors, that hearing is going on right now. That trial. So we're seeing some of those things happening. I think there are a few people who are trying to play a waiting game just because they know that this is too difficult a situation um, to sort out in the middle of it. But also, I think a few of them are probably waiting for the midterm elections to see who comes out on the other side, because the promise is that if Republicans regain power, within the House, if they, get power in the Senate, then we are definitely going to see more bills that are at the federal level coming along and taking away the concern of all this, because they're going to write these at the federal level.
Mm. Yeah, and remove rights for millions of Americans.
Yeah,
seems sort of anti-American, but they're pushing it.
exactly.
Eddie Izzard, I love that we're finally talking about them now, officially launches campaign to become Labour MP and take the fight to the Tories.
Eddie Izzard has been getting a lot of attention in the last few years, having begun to identify as transgender and accept, a transformation of pronouns, and, not really going all out and being in front of the media all the time, but at the same time making their presence known. And now they have decided, hey, we're going to go out and we're going to try politics next. And so they're going to be running as a candidate in the Sheffield Central MP position, and hopefully will be able to assume that role and become the first openly trans person elected to Parliament within the UK.
That's so wonderful. I've been following them for a long time, and it's great to see them finally step into the political ring. I guess they were. I guess she was part of the court system. Yeah, trying to. I see a line here. I'm trying to trace it back and find the and find the what they said about it. But she later left the court to pursue her comedy career, and credited Sheffield with inspiring her to run 43 marathons around the UK for sport relief.
Yeah.
But I didn't see the part about the courts. To do a little bit more research on that. But it's wonderful to see her out and uh, officially trans, and then now
Yeah.
running for office. This will be great. I'd be so curious to see what she thinks that her identity as trans now does for the cross dressing community, because she was
Right.
a vehement cross dresser transvestite for a very long time, and now adopting this identity. It's just an interesting change for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Transgender woman must sign up. Transgender women, I don't want to pull a Marjorie Taylor Greene here, uh, must sign up for military draft under the Biden administration while trans men get a pass. What has brought this about?
Okay, so first of all, this is nothing new. This is nothing that has been implemented. This is nothing that has changed.
Okay.
This is actually a restatement of what has formerly been in place. Let's first of all clarify when we talk about signing up for the draft, there is not now currently a draft within the United States. What we are talking about is the legal requirement for males of legal age, 18, signing up for the United States Selective Service. When that was established, the policy was written such that anyone who was born and identified as male was required to sign up with the U.S. Selective Service when they reached 18 years old. The Selective Service has issued a reminder that transgender women also still must register with U.S. Selective Service. So, if you are 18 years old and you are a transgender woman, you are required by law to sign up under the U.S. Selective Service.
Hmm.
If there is ever a draft implemented during a time of war, then yes, transgender women could be drafted into the military. Transgender men are not. Transgender men would be able to join the military voluntarily, while a draft would be able to bring transgender women into the military.
Hmm. Which
And
is so interesting considering all of the fight and all of the strife that there has been throughout the military over trans and gay rights. And so I know we're in a pretty good spot right now outside of what Trump had implemented there with the ban on trans folks serving, but it's still just kind of an interesting thing to be caught up in again.
I, this is the thing that gets me. Um, Transgender women are required to sign up for selective service and will then be mandated to participate in the draft. But Republicans will sit here and tell you that the effectiveness and the readiness of the military diminishes with the presence of transgender women in the ranks. So Republicans are now going to have to deal with one of two things: changing their rhetoric or changing the selective service law, because they can't keep both of those.
Mm-hmm.
If a transgender woman brings down readiness for the military, then they are in effect not to be drafted because they are not able bodied individuals.
Mm-hmm.
So the Republicans and conservatives are in a catch-22. Keep the selective service as it is, or change their rhetoric about transgender women.
Yeah, that's interesting because if they do change it, they're sort of suggesting that trans women are women, and that would that would be tough for them, I'm sure.
Yeah, it would. Now, granted, they will use a scapegoat such as, well, they're just mentally ill or something like that. But at the same time, it's a beautiful catch-22 to see Republicans in.
Mhm. A gay lawmaker has summed up what everyone is thinking about Tulsi Gabbard in just 6 words. What are those 6 words according to this article?
So Tulsi Gabbard has been the Democratic representative from Hawaii. And just last week, Tulsi Gabbard announced that she is no longer going to be a part of the Democratic Party. In fact, she went on to encourage Democrats who are rational and who don't like the wokeness and the anti white racism of the current rhetoric of the left. They should be bold enough to join her in her action to leave the Democratic Party. Now, Representative Malcolm Kenyatta, when hearing this news, tweeted out this simple question. Wait, Tulsi Gabbard was a Democrat? Because all along, Tulsi Gabbard has been voting very similar to a Republican record and keeping consistent with more conservative um, positions on issues within the government. So there are a lot of people who were very curious why she was continuing on the Democratic ticket and why she continued to identify with the Democratic ticket. But obviously, she no longer feels that that is something she can identify as.
Good. Well,
So
yeah, and I'm assuming that the issue here is the running the opponents. You know, she could probably get up easily in the Democratic ranks, where there's probably some decent Republican challengers there for her. So,
yeah, but I
we'll
mean,
see how it plays out.
as everything plays out, I think we can all agree that as of right now, since Tulsi cannot identify with the Democratic Party, she's now transpolitical.
Mm-hmm. Transpolitical. Well, and there's another thing that I wasn't considering too. She is a woman, and the Republicans typically haven't been good about supporting their women candidates. They've gotten through a few, but it's only been in recent years that that's been picking up. So I think that's why she's seeing her opportunity now to switch over to the party she's always wanted to be part of and the rhetoric she wants to push forward. Moving across the pond, Liz Truss says allegations against trans youth charity Mermaids should be properly looked at. But they're going after the Mermaids organization. What's this about here?
So we're actually going to have a couple of stories on this, but Mermaids, as a trans support organization and charity, is really being raked over the coals in the political system right now in the UK. There are questions on the safeguarding failures on behalf of Mermaids when dealing with trans youth in the UK. Prime Minister Truss said that breast flattening devices were provided to trans youth behind their parents' back, that the charity promoted harmful medical and surgical procedures to children. And actually, this was not Truss. It was actually uh, Miriam Cates, who was one of the MPs. But essentially, the idea being that Mermaids has done some things that by others that are considered to be harmful to youth, and that is, sort of put them in a place where trans youth may not be getting appropriate care through this organization.
So Madison just popped in and relayed some information to me. I wonder if we're going to get into this to Liz Truss's new finance minister.
It's not on tonight's agenda.
So, according to Miss Madison and the news that she has heard, and we will follow up on this to make sure, but she brought on a new finance minister who then went through and rolled back on all of her policies. I don't know what policies, but we'll have to follow up on that, like I said, and tax policies. And this could basically torpedo her premiership and make her one of the shortest prime ministers of record in the UK. So that's an interesting thing to hear, and we will follow up on that when we know more about that. But interesting to see somebody who is so staunchly anti-trans and is doing so many horrible things already might be on the short ticket there.
Yeah. So I'm just looking at this real quick. She fired her finance minister. Here we go. Liz Truss fired her finance minister and close ally Kwasi Kwarteng. Hours later, she announced a U-turn on their economic package, attempting to calm financial markets and reinforce her shaky leadership position. Little more than a month after taking office. This is all from NPR. Shortly after sacking the finance minister, Truss held a news conference saying we need to act now to reassure the markets of our fiscal discipline. Let's see. Within days, Finance Minister Kwarteng had proposed a series of tax cuts and spending measures without saying how they would be funded. The proposal led the pound to weaken to a record low against the dollar. Millions of homeowners faced steep increases to their mortgage rates, and government borrowing costs skyrocketed. That prompted the Bank of England to step in to prevent crisis. It looks like a little bit of somebody didn't know what they were doing in their job. Thank you, Madison.
Yes. So yeah, we will keep apprised of that and let you know more once we have it. Trans teens could face forced detransition and parents jailed under horrific Michigan bill.
This is very similar to the Idaho bill that we looked at toward the end of last year, I believe it was, where it would basically make any gender affirming care, such as puberty blocker, hormone therapy, or surgery for a minor, a first-degree child abuse charge. And along with that, politicians are saying that, or the people who are promoting this House bill proposed a maximum penalty of life imprisonment for parents, guardians, or licensed medical professionals that assist by providing such care.
Oh my God.
Yep. He claimed that people are abusing trans youth by supporting them and helping them access gender affirming care.
How do you put that sentence together? How do you make that statement? By supporting kids, you're abusing them. That's literally an oxymoron.
This Republican state representative, Beau Lefebvre, told The Hill that he believed it's logically incoherent to provide gender-affirming health care to some young people when it's illegal for them to have sex.
I'm sorry, where and why is it illegal for them to have sex? And two, what? Like how those have been proven completely unrelated. So what now?
So basically, again, this is all part of the talking points that have come out of the Alliance Defending Freedom, the Family Research Council, the family councils within each of the states, focus on the family. All of these religious and conservative think tanks and political action groups who have gotten together to basically build this strategy for eliminating transgender people. And it's like, it doesn't matter what the research says. Well, all we need to do are throw in the right words, and we can separate transgender people out, whether they are transgender individuals or they are allies who are helping transgender people take care of their medical care. So it could be, I mean, they're looking at medical professionals, they're looking at parents of trans kids, and they're looking at trans adults. And basically, if they can create enough fear, hate, and prejudice against trans support, it doesn't matter if it's true. It doesn't matter if it's based in fact. It doesn't matter that they're being incoherently illogical in their statements. They just want to create the image of fear to be able to render transgender people as monsters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it like I said last week, the Republican talking points and the Republican, at least the I don't know if it's the general Republican plan to completely eliminate trans folks as a complete and utter trans genocide, but it's definitely the Christian right. It's definitely part of their agenda. Is this these are all lies about supporting youth sports and protecting safe female spaces and things like that. It is all a fabrication around getting people to support their genocide against trans folks. That's
Yeah,
all it is.
absolutely.
All right. Young trans people accessing treatment outside NHS may get safeguarding referral.
This follows on the heels of what we were just talking about in Liz Truss calling out mermaids, saying that there's been some concerns about the care that's been provided there. And it also follows on what we were just talking about when we were talking about child abuse being called, that gender affirming care is called child abuse. Now in the UK, transgender people could be referred to safeguarding agencies if they access puberty blockers and hormone therapies on the private market after being told by public health professionals that they should not be taking them. If NHS professionals decide a patient should not be taking puberty blockers or hormone treatments, and then they are obtained privately, they can advise the patient's primary care doctor to initiate safeguarding protocols. Now, it doesn't come out and say exactly what those protocols are, but under NHS protocols, safeguarding teams are made up of professionals from the police, medical, and social services who are responsible for ensuring child safety and well being. What it sounds like is child services that we have here in the US.
Mm-hmm. And
And
they'll do what Texas tried to do and send them after kids and parents and
yeah,
separate them and basically put the kids in a um, you know why am I blanking on the the basically a forced detransition, um, what's the term we're all trying to ban, the practice of the electroshock shock
conversion therapy.
conversion therapy. My brain today. But yes, it separate them from the parents and put them into a conversion therapy program.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, basically, what we're seeing is conservative movements around the world are all following one another's cookbook on this. And they're wanting to basically replicate all the same recipes around the world. So the UK is next to start looking at how can we make gender affirming care a child abuse case and bring that child under the care of the government. You're muted.
I don't understand why these politicians believe that a child is better being raised by the government than by their family. I just
Now, wait, now a child is better being raised by the government than being raised by a liberal family.
yes,
Get it right, Em. Get it right now.
it's just so scary when they can
I just want to throw out there. Does anybody remember when the Republicans lost their ever loving religious shit when um the spanking issue came out and they were blaming the liberals for wanting to intrude upon their families and taking spanking out of school, and that was corporal punishment, and they didn't have the right to do that. And when liberals called spanking child abuse, the Republicans were like, no, 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 no. So yeah, this is a lot more of the tit for tat and going back and forth, trying to basically point out that one side is worse than the other. So I say take a step back and just recognize that this is not the issue of child abuse. This is the issue of genocide. It's not abuse. It is definitely genocide. They are trying to do the same thing with transgender people that were done with American indigenous peoples. By bringing them into the government care, they can then indoctrinate, assimilate, and create the type of population that they want out of this group of people who are marginalized.
It's all about erasure,
Yeah.
which again is genocide.
Yes.
GOP candidate accuses opponent of wanting transgender indoctrination in kindergarten. Another popular talking point that is complete BS. Why is this being said? Where is this?
Okay, so first of all, I want to let everyone know that no, this episode of Transistance is not the Groundhog Day episode of Transistance. You're going to hear something that sounds like the same story multiple times tonight. That was on purpose. Maryland's Republican governor candidate, Dan Cox, said that the state's kindergarten students are receiving transgender indoctrination. When asked about supporting LGBTQ students in Maryland schools, Cox said, "We know that young people who identify as LGBTQ face a lot of challenges. Do you believe these children are being adequately supported in our public schools? And are public schools doing a good enough job educating the whole body of students about LGBTQ issues?" That's the question he was presented with. Cox responded, "No, we're not doing enough because too many times we exclude the parents from involvement. I fought against a bill that would literally allow 12-year-olds to receive counseling without their parents even knowing. That's wrong. We need to make sure parents are involved. What I will do is ensure that the indoctrination stops. We cannot have transgender indoctrination in kindergarten. I mean, that's preposterous. That's exactly what my opponent supports. It's on his website. I will stand against that and eradicate that from the curriculum and get back to world class learning." And then Cox was asked to clarify what he meant by indoctrination. The candidate cites Genderqueer, the memoir of Maya Kobabe, and he claimed there are things in that book that I cannot show you on television. It's so disgusting. Um, Basically, again, we want to go back to this point. If they can create the fear that something negative is happening to children and create the image that somehow their innocence is being lost, what is in gender queer is not disgusting. It is a open and frank discussion of puberty, its biological and physical concerns, and sex and sexuality as an individual develops. Is it appropriate for kindergarten? No. But is it being used in kindergartens? No, it's not.
Well, yeah, that's the part that sort of confused me there. I didn't realize that kindergartners were 12 years old.
Right?
That's the part where I got a little confused when he said you're talking about 12-year-olds and then about kindergartners, and it's like those. I thought those were different things.
Yeah. In some states, I mean, 12-year-old kindergartners in Alabama is not unheard of. So
True, true. That's why Alabama, Oklahoma, some of these states are very adamant about this stuff because, yeah, they don't. Oh my God, I just love that those times when they make their arguments so transparently false,
yeah.
and yet somehow it still gets by when they mention that um, 12-year-olds have access to this book. I'm assuming I'm just sort of paraphrasing here, and that he then wants to stop indoctrination for kindergartners. It's like,
Right.
how does that pass the muster for anybody? Those are clearly very different things. 12-year-olds are on the verge or are already going through puberty. So it is the perfect time to be talking about puberty.
Right.
And so it's not indoctrination, it's actual good healthcare policy and good education policy for adolescents.
Right.
And this man, Dan Cox, who should have spent more time in school learning and paying attention to how old kids are in kindergarten and when this is actually being addressed. And
Yeah.
furthermore, I would like for him to point out a school that uses Genderqueer, that book, as their sex ed curriculum. He can't do it. That's the answer because it's not. I'm sure it could be part of, or at least available to students. I think that's the more likely thing, but part of some indoctrination scheme where it's being pushed upon kids as the be all end all of what puberty is. I think that's as flimsy and false as everything else he said.
Mm-hmm.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, another one of our favorites, hopes the Supreme Court has the balance to overturn same sex marriage rights. Well, Donald Trump made sure of that.
Yeah, very much so. And Marjorie was speaking at an event held by the America First Warehouse. I don't even know what that is.
Is
In
that where they
Ron,
store all their MAGA
yeah,
merchandise?
I guess so. But it was in Ronkonkoma, New York. Now, look, I'm from Oklahoma, and we got some names. That's a new one on me. I'd never heard that one before, so that's fresh. But Marjorie Taylor Greene was asked about Obergefell and Hodges, the 2015 Supreme Court decision that legalized marriage equality. And the questioner asked, um, as toxic to the culture, just as toxic to the culture was Obergefell decision that claimed marriage could be between someone other than one man and one woman. He said, as Greene nodded, what are our chances of getting that overturned? And Greene responded with, I think we have a better chance of the Supreme Court on the Supreme Court right now than we had with the Dobbs case and with Roe versus Wade getting overturned. I think we have a better chance there with the balance of the Supreme Court as it stands right now than we do in Congress. So I'm gonna pause right there and deal with that, and then go on and continue with what she said. She just made the claim that there's a better chance of getting something done in the Supreme Court than there is in Congress, meaning that there is a better way to influence the law of the land in the Supreme Court than there is by writing laws. Now, this is getting very, very close to judicial legislation, which is something that Republicans have whined about for quite some time. That claiming that Republicans have claimed that Democrats have been using the Supreme Court to legislate from the bench. This is, this is the same thing she's talking about, only she's talking about it from a positive point of view. That if they can keep the Supreme Court moving in the direction that they have been moving, then they can create laws that are better, have a better chance of success than they do in the Congress. But then she continued. Now, we know that the Bible tells us marriage is a covenant between a man and a woman. That's what marriage is. Do I see anything happening legislatively in Congress anytime soon on that issue? I don't. Going back to what I was just talking about, judicial legislation, and the idea that if they can continue to press the Supreme Court, she knows that there's not a chance of getting anything written into law that would illegally separate, marriage equality from the rights of people. But I want to go back to this and just hit on this little bitty sticking point for me. The Bible tells us marriage is a covenant between a man and a woman. And a woman. And a woman. And a concubine. And a servant. And a concubine. You see, the funny thing about the Bible talking about marriage is that they do seem to ignore that there were a lot of those individuals who were in a good biblical marriage, who there were a lot of folks sleeping around together legally and covenantally in one bed.
Interesting take. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene has come out and said essentially that she is just the property of her husband. You know that that females are.
Not anymore. She's not.
What's that?
So not anymore. She's not.
No.
Husband has said no, 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 no.
I don't want it. I don't want it. Can I return it? If it's my property, can I return it? Can I still got my receipt.
Look, I got this from Otasco. Is there an Otasco left?
Oh, just so much wow.
Yeah.
And you know the thing is just to remember how they're approaching this sort of legislative agenda through this supposedly non-political body, non-political branch of the government, is to get the Supreme Court to say that the Constitution does not guarantee you a right. And what they're trying to do basically is say that the Constitution doesn't guarantee you any rights, so that then at the state level they can remove those rights legally. That's how it's going to be done. So they're going to eschew the responsibility of the federal government entirely and have the Supreme Court say that one, the federal government doesn't have the right to regulate the rights of people, and two, that in the Constitution, if it's not specifically listed as a right, you don't have that right.
Right.
Exactly. And then that allows the states to just do whatever they want and erode all human rights, except for the ones that they want you to have specifically. And I don't know about y'all, but that sounds like a very scary country that does not sound in any way like America.
No.
Moving on to another member of the Marjorie Taylor Greene and Friends crew, Lauren Boebert. Lauren confuses everyone with bizarre attack on Joe Biden and trans people. How was she confusing all of the people hearing this speech or whatever it is that she's said
so
here?
This was in response to the news about, or the announcement from Selective Service reminding everyone that transgender women are still required to sign up for Selective Service at 18. Laura Boebert says trans women, also known as men, will be forced to sign up for the draft. Looks like Joe Biden has just officially confirmed what a woman is and what a woman isn't. When you don't even know where to start, you can pretty much guess that she didn't know where she ended. The thing is that, first of all, she loves to jump onto the turf language of trans women are men, and she loves to use that. And second of all, no one is forced to sign up for the draft. It's the law of the land. And, you know, it's a matter of, look, when you hit 18, the law requires that you go and get signed up with Selective Service. If she considers that the law is forcing people to do something, then maybe we should turn that philosophy back on her and have her do a few things differently. But I digress. Looks like Joe Biden has just officially confirmed what a woman is and what a woman isn't. And that's what we were going back to a little bit ago. She doesn't even know that she fucked up. Because, as I said, transgender women are required. Transgender men are not required. That means that transgender women are deemed to be able-bodied. Transgender men are not. And so, therefore, a transgender woman is more able-bodied than a transgender man. Ergo, they're either going to have to change the law or they're going to have to change their rhetoric.
Or they're going to have to keep talking out of both sides of their mouth and contradicting themselves with everything they say.
Well, that's the given. I'm looking for a best case scenario.
Please, Jeannie, as a friend of mine, do not hold your breath for that.
Okay.
Do not want to lose you that quickly. GOP Senate candidate Herschel Walker mocks transgender people who serve in the military. So we're staying on a theme here. What is this charming individual saying now?
So Herschel Walker, first of all, seems to be getting a lot of attention lately, and some of it actually does happen to cross, the Transistance news desk because he just cannot stay out of transgender people's lives. So he was at an event and said, just think about it. Pronoun in our military, how do you identify in our military? These are war times. What happened to push ups and sit ups? Now,
they don't have time for push-ups and sit-ups because they're using correct pronouns.
yeah,
Clearly, that takes a lot of time to say they, them, she, her instead of he, him.
but I got to ask this. When did we declare war on someone? What war are we fighting right now? These are war times. Herschel, baby, where are we fighting, honey? Where's the war? But he goes on. I can tell you right now, China, Iran, and Russia are not talking about pronouns. So we're at war with China, Iran, and Russia. They got us believing we can bring wokeness into our military. We should never bring wokeness into all our military. This is where things get a little weird. He then goes
Using
on.
reality was just the start, and now we're going to get weird beyond that. Okay.
Not knowing what he was talking about now jumps into the weird stuff. He says, you've gotten a little bit too smart. You don't fall for it. You don't let them take you in that elevator to hell. So they're going to take your kids now. They're going to take your kids down now. But they want to tell you, the white kids, that you're an oppressor. They want to tell the black kids you're a victim. No, all of them are victorious. And it's at this point that I'm not even sure that Herschel Walker knows where he is when he's talking. But that is just my opinion on that. But yeah, he went on this weird, just bizarre, strange little tirade that, I mean, he and Lauren Boebert really need to have more conversations together.
I almost feel like, based on what you said, yeah, maybe he didn't undergo enough concussion protocol in his time in the military. GOP Senate candidate demands schools notify parents if their kids identify as chipmunks. Okay. Okay. Oh, this is this very typical tactic on the Republican side to demonize and come out and make a stand against something that doesn't exist, and of course that everyone would agree could agree is strange or wrong or whatever, to make this complete straw man argument that they can then say, here I am, I'm the white knight to save our kids from identifying as chipmunks. This is just so typical, and this is like Herschel Walker level crazy.
Right. So JD Vance was on the Bill Cunningham show. It's a Christian talk radio show. And the host brought up this line of discussion. There are some students identifying as cats and they bring kitty litter with them to school. Some identify as dogs and they have to be called Fido and little pussycats instead of human beings. One of the worst things is if they do not use the proper preferred nouns and pronouns of other students, K through 12th grade, schools will be required to socially transition using child-selected names and pronouns in school. First of all, that's like, how many different fear-mongering memes can you throw together in one sentence to create a hellscape of ignorance? I don't know, but that got pretty damn close. He goes on, minor kids like yours, JD Vance, will not be notified if your child wants to socially transition to a different gender or to an animal species. Should you be entitled to know if your 7-year-old identifies as a chipmunk? Um, Instead of saying, um, you know, Bill, what did you have in your coffee before you came in this morning? JD Vance went right along with it and said, I think I'm very much entitled to know that. What a crazy point we've reached in this country, Willie. Willie? Willie. Oh. Where schools are doing this stuff without the approval of parents.
Well, where are we in our political spectrum where politicians are allowed to come out and say these things without any backing, any evidence, or any fact or reality behind the allegations they're making, and they're not held to anything, liably. um,
Honey,
so
honey.
crazy. I mean,
This is an argument that goes back to the Lincoln debates, because there were claims being thrown around in the Lincoln debates that were preposterous. And it was decided even back then that they could be as preposterous as they wanted to be. It was all just posturing.
I don't like it when it affects my life, though. So ridiculous.
Indeed.
I mean, I wonder what it's going to take for us to get past that litter box myth. I just wonder what it's going to be. Like, I loved what John Oliver said about it. Like, if there were kids using litter boxes, you would not hear about it through a government representative. You would hear about it from every news organization ever. Like, it would be everywhere.
Yeah.
The evidence, the proof, the story, the interviews with the people, the teachers. There's none of that. It's
Right.
all I heard, I believe, and or just these statements that there is without any evidence, without any pointing to anything. And the litter box one is just so ridiculous, and I'm amazed at how much traction it has, considering all of the other things that are more believable and more realistic that are also false that people are believing as well.
And it doesn't take much, Emily, because I mean, just go back and consider when we were growing up. We're coming up on Halloween. What was the one thing parents were terrified of when we were growing up at Halloween? Who's put razor blades in the apples? Now, there was no there was no widespread outbreak of that I can trace down anywhere. But that was the thing.
Mhm.
It's like, oh my God, somebody could hurt my baby. So don't take anything that's not wrapped candy.
Uh-huh. Because there's no way to tamper with wrapped candy and make it look safe.
Right.
That's not possible.
Now, here's the one that's going around right now, which kind of like this one going around right now, and that is that in all of these states that have legalized recreational marijuana or medical marijuana with easy access, that people are going to be handing out edibles for trick or treat to kids to get them hooked on marijuana. And it's like, damn, can I get a costume right now?
Well, and how disconnected from their kids' lives are parents that something like this would get through. They would get the kids would get. I mean, because the fear is the kids would get hooked on these drugs.
Yeah.
That it would be prevalent enough to where the kids would get hooked on the drug without the parents being the wiser in any way. And going back to your apples thing and my statement about the wrapper, it was exactly what you said. There was a fear of razor blades in apples, so don't take anything that's not wrapped. If you put a razor blade in an apple, it's gonna be pretty freaking obvious because you're going to see the entry point. Whereas a wrapper is very easily tampered with and glued shut. Um, and so it's just that false statement that leads to a completely not only incorrect but 180 degrees from the truth belief. And it's it's amazing how they're able to do it. It's actually impressive.
Yeah. And it's, it's again just playing on the natural born fears that we have regarding children,
Mm-hmm.
and saying, look, we have to protect our kids. Therefore, if there's any possibility of this completely random, I mean, we might as well just start going around and selling asteroid helmets for kids and saying, look, we've seen an increase in the number of asteroids that have been near miss to the Earth. So we need to protect our kids, and let's start getting them some asteroid helmets so that when or if an asteroid does hit, because it's very likely to do it at some point, they will have some form of protection. Emily, I see a burgeoning market for the Transverse.
Because of the
Asteroid
space
helmet.
tie-in. Ah, ah. I love what Autumn said in chat. They're not going to pass out $20 gummies. Um, but if they were going to, do that, like if you were going to give a kid something laced with something, you would want to be around to see what happened. You
Yeah.
wouldn't want to just do it and then laugh about it. Like maybe somebody would, but that's highly unlikely. Like it would be a situation where you're sitting there with the kid, like, you know, um, but anywho, we're digressing. The one thing I wanted to bring up that was sort of interesting and a thought that I've had for a long time along those lines is, you know, everybody always talks about when it was easier and safer back in the day for kids to be outside or to ride their bikes and all of this stuff. Um, and I've long wondered if that was actually true. If it is any less safe for kids to be out riding around on their bikes, or if it's just this perception because of the extra news that's out there about all the bad things going on out there. I believe it's probably just a perception that people are more aware of the dangers out there, that it's not any more dangerous than it was before.
No, just as the prevalence of transgender people is no greater than it was before.
Mm.
The idea is that we have ready access to media that can be anywhere, and so the numbers that we're looking at, whether they are safety numbers or population numbers, they're all very much probably the same percentages that we've always seen. Are there more people? Yes. Are there more incidents? Yes. But that does not necessarily mean that the ratios have increased.
Mm. J.K. Rowling says she's too rich to care about hurting transgender people. Wow, what a level of privilege to be able to just not care about stepping on anybody. It's so surprising, a concept that rich people don't care about hurting poor people.
Right?
Wow, this is revolutionary.
Right? Yeah, that's what they said in the 18th century. Um, so someone tweeted to her, how do you sleep at night knowing you've lost a whole audience from buying your books? Which, this is very much consequence for the attitudes that she has maintained over the last few years regarding transgender people and specifically transgender women, and that there has been a backlash of boycotting and rejecting of, you know, JK's stuff. So, yeah, people have stopped giving her money. But her response was, I read my most recent royalty checks and find the pain goes away pretty quickly. Which I want to say this in terms of snappy comebacks, that one's pretty damn good. I
Mhm.
mean, that's a really good comeback, and I appreciate the sass that she kind of just kind of tossed out there. So I can give her points for sass. Um, but at the same point, we also know that she is very much, she has taken her privilege, she has taken her um, popularity and the success that she has had, and she has now turned that into a leverage point that she believes that she is above any kind of critical um, reaction from people. So, you know what? Let her have her money. I've known a lot of miserable people who had a lot of money when they died.
Hmm. Let's move on to a story that possibly ties into something that is very important to me right now as the Transverse works on the Trans Day of Remembrance celebration here in the county that I live in. More than half of trans and non binary people are misgendered in death by officials, research says. And why I feel this is important to talk about when we're talking about Trans Day of Remembrance is it skews our numbers. We talk about how uh, deaths and violence against trans people is rising, but it's hard for us to understand the true numbers because so often they're misgendered in victims are misgendered in police reports and in reporting that follows up.
Yeah. So between 2011 and 2021, a study that was published within the Journal of Public Health Management and Practice found that more than half transgender, non binary people were misgendered on their death certificates, not just on reports, not just on news stories, but on death certificates, which are an official documentation. They're a legal document. So when we start talking about that, especially for somebody who is, currently trying to get their birth certificate amended, um, we're talking about legal documents that are pretty important, not just for the individual and for a sense of identity and euphoria, but also in the ideas of identification and legal um, standing within the country. So when we see, nearly half, if not more than half, of transgender non-binary individuals being misgendered on their death certificate, then we're watching people not be counted as who they are. So when they die, they disappear.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone goes to their grave with a death certificate of their dead name, that identity of who they were as a transgender non-binary person vanishes. And we lose people. And when we lose people like that, that is our community just drifting away. It is our community evaporating into the ether. And I'm going to take a moment here, Ian. In my former life, one of the greatest moments that I got to participate in was to be an officiant during a funeral, because I got to sit down with family and friends and people who knew someone that had died. And I got to listen to stories, and I got to see how important that individual's life was based upon the people who knew them. The hardest funeral I ever did involved an elderly woman who had no family, who had kept pretty much to herself in the nursing home. And so when it came time to talk with people about this woman's life, there was no one to tell her story. There was no one to continue her life. And there was no one to make sure that she was remembered. The sad reality is that I don't even remember her name. I remember the event, but I don't remember her. When transgender, non binary people are misgendered in their official death certificate, they're not going to be remembered. So it is important for us to recognize the need to tell our stories to one another, to ensure that the people around us know us. Because even if our families choose to dead name us in our death and dishonor us in our death certificates, if we tell our stories and if we listen to one another, we will remember, we will be remembered, and we will go on.
I love it. Sounds like a wonderful plug for the transgender show. So thank you.
Mhm.
A GOP Senate candidate, Alex Luxalt, said Democrats want to indoctrinate kids into being transgender. This is more of the Groundhog Day of this
This is the
episode.
Groundhog Day. Lexalt appeared on the Breitbart News podcast on March 31st. And yeah, we're going back this far to find this, but the Lexalt's campaign is basically pushing and pushing and pushing to replicate what so many others have tried to do. And basically, back then, he said, kudos to Ron DeSantis for signing the Don't Say Gay bill and then for going on offense. So his comments have then gone on to include that he was referring to transgenderism in kindergarten, and he has stood by that. This is he has been an opponent of LGBTQ equality. HRC Nevada pointed out in 2018 that he had an obsession with attacking the LGBTQ community, including a 2014 statement against marriage equality, opposition to LGBTQ people serving openly in the military. So, he's definitely not one to go out and try to learn his own platform. He's just going to take the talking points. So if you are in Nevada and you see Lexalt on your campaign ballot, please take into consideration that this is an individual who does not think for himself. He only listens to those people around him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of that right now. We're seeing this push of cookie cutter candidates that are repeating all of the same rhetoric, all of the same lies, using the same sentences because they're handed a script, and it's like, for the Republican, the Christian right, the MAGA agenda to be supported by and endorsed by people like Trump and things like that. Here's what you have to do, and this is your success. This is your ticket to success here. Follow this, fall in line, just say these things, and you'll be successful. And so we're seeing candidates just drop thought and any personal opinion, any morality, any of that, and just reading from a script.
Yeah. It's Willie Trump Wonka golden ticket. As long as you have what's written on the back side of this, you get the sign of approval from Donald Boy, and off you go into MAGA Happy Land.
Which, again, it really shocks me that people are willing to do that. They're willing to eschew any sense of morality or dignity for
Integrity.
their individualism and just toe a line for the sheer gain of success.
Yeah.
It's just to get that level of success politically. It has no basis on any kind of reality or, like I said, any bearing, any basis in morality or reality. And it's just it's a very scary, but it's also just a strange thing to see so many people willing to do.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Another GOP lawmaker here forces Pride event indoors and required ID so only adults can attend.
Jackson, Tennessee, was hosting their Pride Festival, but they had to take it inside because a local lawmaker who is running for reelection um, basically called it out and began to, get the community outraged because there was going to be a drag performance and they were going to be talking about, you know, LGBTQ and all of that stuff. The 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 rhetoric that this individual was throwing out actually got the attention of the Proud Boys and the Westboro Baptist Church, which when you got the Westboro Baptist Church and the Proud Boys on your side, that's not a good thing. Okay. Does anyone remember when the Westboro Baptist Church were some of the most villainized individuals in the United States? Does anyone remember when the Westboro Baptist Church was basically, being mocked by everybody? Does anyone remember when the Westboro Baptist Church would have bikers parked in front of them, revving their motorcycles to keep them from being able to shout at the members of a family of a deceased soldier? Does anyone remember when the Westboro Baptist Church had ordinances written just for them saying you cannot protest a funeral? When you are on the same side as the Westboro Baptist Church, you're on the wrong side.
Mm-hmm.
So when your Proud Boys and your Westboro Baptist Church are your biggest allies, maybe, just maybe, you done fucked up somehow.
Let's tangent again. I don't know. We don't really have the time for it. But what's the stance of the Proud Boys now with the January 6th, investigations? Because the Proud Boys were very prominent there. They were very loud and vocal and a big part of the insurrection, the attempted coup in our country. So what is their status now? I mean, are they not being called a terrorist organization yet?
No, they're not being called a terrorist organization. They are not even being considered as a whole a threat to national security. The thing about the insurrection hearings, the January 6th hearings, is that they are looking at specific individuals. And the cases that have been brought are not against organizations, they are against individual representative leaders within those organizations. So the thing is that, here's, I think the founder of the Proud Boys has been brought up on insurrection charges, and they are being challenged. It's basically a matter of keeping, the I just got banned for misinformation. Um, Basically, it's the thing that you don't you don't cut off the head, really. They're just going to keep, splintering out into their different um, cells anyway, because that's how they function. They function as, individual cells in each of these states, but then they come together if they need help in a big event.
Mhm. Well, and Trump was already proud to come out and say, to talk to them directly and say, stay in your little cell, stay quiet, and just stay ready for uh, essentially the civil war that they want to create.
Right.
Anderson Cooper was stunned as an anti-LGBTQ plus church president told him that gay people can't be Christian. What's going on here, and why was he surprised by that?
So First of all, Anderson Cooper was talking with the president of the Southern Baptist Convention. Now, the description in the article is a little off-putting, but the president of the Southern Baptist Convention is actually not really responsible for the entirety of the Southern Baptist Church. The president is basically just kind of sitting and convenes the convention where they talk about some big general subject matters. Now, in the interview for 60 Minutes, he explained why the church overwhelmingly opposes same-sex marriage, and I think we all know that. You know, they see same-sex individuals as sinners, and that people should be converted out of being sinners. This is the part that gets me. He also said, and that applies to all of us, meaning everybody's a sinner and we all need to be converted out of it. But he goes on to say, we're committed to the idea of gender as a gift of God. We're committed to the idea that men and women ought to be united with one another in marriage. So Anderson Cooper, who, you know, has been identified and has come out as a gay man, said, can a person be a good Christian, a member of the Southern Baptist Convention, and LGBTQ+? And the president of the Southern Baptist Convention said no. They want to keep the idea of sin at the forefront of this. They want to keep the subject of sin at the very, you know, as the very keystone part of the discussion of LGBTQ plus people, that they are making a choice to do this thing that is essentially just the corruption of sin in their life. They are giving into that sin. If they would just learn to not give into the sin and take a step back, then they could live a sanctified life. They could live a converted life. They could live a sinless life, except they don't believe in that, which is really kind of funny. And I'm not going to get into that theology.
Well, no, that is exactly the flaw in their entire argument. Like, he contradicts himself completely and utterly invalidates his argument entirely by saying that being gay is a sin, and then also saying we are all sinners.
Right.
So it's just like LGBT people are sinning in a certain way, but we're all sinners. So either none of us can be Southern Baptist or all of us can be. He completely shot his argument in the butt.
Well, he did, but he didn't. He did, but he didn't. He likes to make the point that even though he is a sinner, he asks for forgiveness.
So it's an assumption that gay people aren't asking for forgiveness when they go to confession or
exactly
when they pray.
But, okay, a gay person chooses to live in that lifestyle. Even though they ask for forgiveness, they don't really mean it.
Okay.
Now, I was hoping you would come back with something on that one. Come on, if you're going to play in my sandbox, Emily, you're going to have to play, honey.
Well, it's just so absurd. It's a rabbit hole of why go down it. Like, if you're going to make these claims about people that are unfounded to back up your argument, when you have just said that all of us are sinners, and that they are sinning as well, like, there's nothing in that argument that says that one sin is worse in the eye of the Lord than another. And there's no proof in his argument that that gay people aren't repentant. And so,
yes, there is.
Like,
because you chose the key word. You chose the key word. Repentant. because in repenting, you stop.
Oh, I've never believed that to be true.
But that's what the word means.
Hmm.
It is to stop going in a direction. It is to discontinue moving in one direction and revert back in a different direction. That's what the word means.
Hmm.
Now, they don't like to preach that because there are sins within their own community that they want to continue.
Mm-hmm. But
But
the basis of religion, when you're talking about sinning and you're talking about us all being sinners,
mhm,
is that we are all created by God as sinners. Because we are all created by God, He is infallible, and we are all sinners. So, thus, we are all created by God as sinners. Um, I see what you're saying. Like his belief is that all other sinners are giving up everything that they do to sin, and that's the but see, the thing is that is what you do to get into heaven. That's not what you do to get in to be a member of the church. Being a member of the church is working on that, is working on your repentance. That's what the church is about. You don't go to church because you are saved and you are a saint. You go to a church to work on yourself and improve yourself. So again, a complete and utter contradiction in what he's saying. The floor is yours, my dear.
okay, here we go.
I don't have strong alcohol at my side though. I
First
feel
of
like you
all,
already got an advantage.
God doesn't create people as sinful. God created the world as good, and then humanity caused sin to happen, and therefore all humans are born into sin, not by God's work, but by man's work. So, secondly,
But,
um,
but where did men come from?
no, 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 no. God created all men good, and then through man's work, sin entered into the world.
Okay.
Okay?
I mean, I find that contradictory, but okay, let's go.
Look, honey, like I said, you're going to play in my sandbox. You better bring the good toys. But going on, no, we do not come into the church to work on ourselves. That's when we go into a 12-step program. When we come into the church, we join a community of faith, of people bound together, invested in one another, helping one another to grow and increase in maturity and knowledge of love of Christ and of people. And it's not about improving oneself, because you see, in the theology of the church, once one has come to Christ, you are already made good. Now it is just a process of becoming a person within a community that is sanctified and made perfect in love for one another and for those who are like you, those who are not like you, and those who hate you.
And so why aren't LGBT people included in that?
Because we are queer as fuck.
But that all seems to be the same thing, to coming together to find faith, to come into uh, the understanding of Jesus Christ and to buy into it, but to learn and to grow, and in the church community, which should mean that everybody would be welcome for that, for the betterment of themselves again. So
Okay, so let me ask you to think about this in this way. What is the therapy called to make a queer person not queer any longer?
conversion.
What is it called when a sinner becomes a Christian?
Conversion, right?
Yeah. The process is the same, meaning that you have to get rid of the old before you can be allowed into the new. So you cannot be a queer Christian because you are not really converted. If
But
you are
he's
still
not
queer,
making the claim that the people in his church, that Christians in his church, are not sinners,
he
are
doesn't
not
have to,
sinning.
Jim.
You
He
you
doesn't
have you
have
just
to.
said you have to shew all of your sins to be a Christian.
No, no. I didn't say you had to eschew your sins. First of all, I don't like the word eschew, so I put a shoe on my foot, and that's the only place that goes, not in my mouth. Now, when you come into Christ, your sins are forgiven. Now, your sins have already been forgiven in the work of Christ done on the cross 2,000 years ago, but
Another
it's
contradiction, yes. Go ahead.
it's another technicality that they don't like to deal with. But anywho, um, when you come into Christ, your sins are forgiven. You are therefore made into a new creation, and that new creation is therefore put upon a path to becoming a more sanctified individual. Okay?
So we're at agree to disagree, I think.
No, we are not there yet. We are at the point of saying that for certain theologies, there is a belief that it doesn't matter how good you live your life, you will never attain goodness. You will never attain a goodness that will grant you access to the community of faith or to God. There are certain denominations and theological beliefs that say no matter how many times you ask for forgiveness and repent from your sin, you will never, ever live in this life free from the influence of sin. And there are denominations that say no matter if you live the best life possible, you are amazingly good. You do all of the right things at the right time. But God decided before you were ever born if you were going to get into the party at the end of the universe. There is no way in heaven or hell you can change the outcome of that. Now, I don't know where this guy's coming from. I do know this. One of the reasons why I left the faith is because, just like Autumn says, it's a moving goalpost. No one group has the definitive answer for how one comes into saving grace. And because of that issue of everybody's got a different path, there is no solid way of being able to go to somebody and say, if you want to have this, you can have this. Because somebody's going to come along and they're going to take it away from you. So I can go to all of my LGBTQ plus siblings as an ordained elder, as a proclaimer of the faith, and I can say to them, God loves you till the ends of the universe. God wants so many great things for your life that God intended from the very foundation of the earth for you to have those great things. And just because you experience being queer, it does not invalidate your claims to what God has set aside for you.
Mm-hmm.
I can go and I can say that to my queer siblings, but there will be 5 preachers who come along after me and take that away from them.
Mm-hmm.
And those 5 preachers can come from different ideas and perspectives and theologies and denominations. And they'll each one have a different reason of why.
Mm-hmm. And none of them will be right. The Vanderbilt University Medical Center to pause gender affirming surgeries for minors while they review their practices. This is the attacks from the right and folks like Matt Walsh and Tucker Carlson having the effect that they want.
More importantly than that, it is who is this? This is CBS News. CBS News is propagating the false narrative that Vanderbilt University was doing gender affirming surgeries on minors.
Mm-hmm. I did
That's where the
notice that in
bullshit
the
is.
headline when I read it before. Yeah.
That's where the bullshit is.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't doing it to begin with, unless it was a rare and extremely documented case of this was an emergency situation, and here's the validation that we have and the proof that we have. Here are the steps that we have taken.
That's quite disappointing. Wow.
Okay, so Vanderbilt's deputy CEO and chief health system officer wrote this: "We are pausing gender affirmation surgeries on patients under 18 while we complete this review." Now, here's my question, going back to what I shared a couple of weeks ago. Are they also going to stop the labiaplasties on cisgender females?
Mm-hmm.
Are they also going to stop the rhinoplasty on minors?
Under 18.
Are they also going to get rid of the breast implants for anyone under 18 who just happens to need a little lift and tuck?
And as you cited when we brought that up, 88,000 of those type of surgeries.
Right. Because whether they want to admit it or not, if somebody is doing something to give them a better image of themselves, that is gender affirming surgery. Because
Mm-hmm.
they are feeling more comfortable in their gender.
Yes. Yeah.
We're not even going to talk about the Botox because that's ridiculous.
That's just very upsetting to see the CBS supporting, this article that supports that narrative that these surgeries are being performed just in and of itself. The headline writing and how they are reporting that. A senator wants trans people defined according to how they pee. Sweet, I am a trans woman then.
So this is in Pakistan. This is not in the U.S., so it doesn't apply to us, Emily, unless we're going to be moving to Pakistan anytime soon.
Probably not in the near future.
Probably not. So we've been talking about Pakistan's transgender rights law from 2018, and there's a current conflict over that. Senator Fajr Arshad of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf is pushing a bill that would define transgender people according to the law as those who keep one hole for urination.
Are there people who use multiple holes for urination? Okay, sorry.
So, the previous bill has a strange definition of transgender person, since it only defines a transgender person as someone whose gender identity is different than their gender assigned at birth, but someone who has both male and female sex characteristics, essentially an intersex individual.
Mm-hmm.
That is their definition of transgender in Pakistan. The new proposal represents, the back and forth that's happening right now over the laws. Vice has written a review on this and said, while Arshad's awkwardly worded proposal has bemused many, making some wonder if she knows the difference between a vagina and a urethra, there's also a larger concern over the direction this movement is taking. So, there is this move that is trying to eliminate transgender rights in Pakistan, even though those rights were only offered in 2018. So, Heather, come on now. We can say the big words. But it's not only just a misunderstanding, but it is a part of the ongoing destruction of our personhood. It is the ongoing destruction of, the ideas that we possess bodies just like other people. It's just that we don't identify with those bodies in the same way. And so we seek to find ways to make ourselves more comfortable with our bodies. And this person just appears to be ignorant of that.
Christian teacher fired after hate campaign against queer propaganda, says she's the victim.
So, Lindsay Barr from Georgia was an early childhood teacher in Bryan County. And in August, she was fired from her job after expressing concerns to her principal about a children's book that she was given to use. The book, All Are Welcome, features images of same sex parents and their children. So it was included in a library read aloud program. And it was going to be read to the students. Now, this was in the elementary school, and the elementary school included her sons. Barr told National Review that she and her family are devout, surprisingly, non-denominational Christians, and the images in the book ran counter to her religious beliefs. She also believes that marriage should only happen between a man and a woman. So, on September 30, Barr, with the help of the Alliance Defending Freedom, filed a lawsuit alleging that the school district violated her First Amendment right to speech and her right to freely exercise her Christian religion. The lawsuit argued that school leaders engaged in an unconstitutional viewpoint discrimination. So I want to go back and I want to touch on something. She said that the book ran counter to her religious beliefs. I'm curious if she puts an angel on top of her tree at Christmas every year. Because if she does that, the image of that angel runs counter to her religious beliefs, because that's not what angels look like. Angels are not these bright little femme-looking individuals with wings and halos and harps and all that shit. Angels are terrifying creatures of undescribable features who are agender at best and probably a little more gender fluid than we want to recognize. Because a lot of them look very femme, but they have names like Michael, Gabriel, very, very big names that, according to the stories, they're very masculine. So I'm just curious if she puts an angel on top of her tree every year. And if it has 6 wings with eyes all around, 4 heads, one head looking like different animals.
Interesting.
If any of y'all want to know more about that, come talk to me after class.
Talk to me after class. Yes. The speaker says LGBTQ students deserve death at a school board meeting. Wow. Just so much. Oof.
This is in Arkansas.
That's the part that's not surprising to me.
This drove me batshit crazy the day that I heard this, because the local Human Resource Council distributed this, and Northwest Arkansas Equality shared this on their Instagram. So this story and the next story are the same, but there was a video taken during a school board meeting. This was an open meeting where they were discussing the familiar anti-trans ordinances for school, sports, bathrooms, all that shit. The man who spoke is Cal Paulson. And what he said shocked people who were listening in the audience. He began by quoting scripture and said this: God gave them over to a depraved mind so that they do what they should not be doing. They invent ways of doing evil. But let me remind you that those who do such things deserve death. And then he launched into his statement. The LGBTQ community not only continues to do things do these very things, but also approves of those who practices them. The school board did not censor him. School board did not call him down. They did not tell him, hey, you're out of line by saying that. But he did make that very clear in that clear connection that those who are in the LGBTQ community deserve death. He went on to say these things. I would like to say that the LGBT community has suppressed the truth about God. They seek to bring their judgment against everyone who does not agree with their gender values. They do this in order to get you to support their self-centered lifestyles. Jason Rapert, who is a senator in Arkansas, was at that school board meeting. And this is what he said. Just because people got loud and demand we support their opinion does not change the truth or facts. God made males and females, and the Conway School Board is doing the right thing here tonight. Now, the school board did issue a statement, or the district issued a statement. In an attempt to allow public voices to be heard, the Conway Public Schools Board of Education allows patrons to speak for a specified amount of time to comment on current agenda items. While the Conway School Board appreciates the insight and perspective given in these comments, the personal narratives of individual patrons do not represent the school district or the school board's feelings or stances on issues. Except for the fact that this very same school board appointed a school board member to fill a vacant seat, and they chose an individual who was a far-right conservative Christian to fill that seat. The school board chose this individual. That person was not elected, as is the normal process. So I don't know if a seat was vacated and they were able to put somebody in, but the idea is that no, it seems like the school board does support what this individual said, and this individual believes that LGBTQ plus people deserve death. And they are a pastor.
Just again, if you can't, if people on that side can't see how this is horrible, deplorable, and wrong, I don't understand them at all. Another school board meeting, this time we move over to Dearborn, Michigan, descends into chaos as protesters demand book bans.
So this is an interesting one. We're quite accustomed to hearing about book bans in school board meetings and those type of things. Mm. But the meeting at the Dearborn Public School Board was met with a crowd that became very close to superseding the fire marshal's safety limit on capacity. And as the situation moved on, as the meeting continued, the hostility and the aggression within the group continued to grow and grow and grow, demanding for the banning of certain books featuring LGBTQ content. And there were 7 books in particular that were being debated on whether or not they would be removed. Now, here's where things get very interesting. The protesters in Dearborn were primarily Muslim, but a key organizer of the local protests was a Christian and attended both the Monday night meeting and another protest. It got to a point where, finally the police had to say, we think that this meeting is going to have to be shut down because it is just getting unsafe for everyone. But it was pretty much a heated meeting of back and forth between a Muslim predominant group as well as other members of the community.
They somebody put out the statement. What happened tonight at the school board meeting in Dearborn is very embarrassing and is totally rejected. Remember that the loss of an individual's right to express himself or herself is the beginning of the end of all people's rights. Interesting.
Yeah.
Story. Homophobic trolls threaten dog shelter over drag queens reading to pups. People just don't have enough to do anymore. I think that's the thing. I think that could be said about both sides of this. But no, it's a sweet thing to go read to dogs. That's cute. I didn't know that was a thing that happened. But to boycott that is like
no, it's not a boycott, sweetie. It's worse than that.
Are they going to indoctrinate dogs somehow? Like
Alabama Dog Shelter, Hard Knocks Rescue and Training has been getting death threats for having drag queens come to read to the puppies, the dogs. So on September 24th, Hard Knocks Rescue and Training has unadoptable dogs. So basically, this is not just a dog pound. This is more like a dog rescue for dogs that probably are not ever going to be adopted. But they decided to do a little event for the dogs, and they had a drag performer come out, and they were doing a Facebook Live. And Miss Majesty Divine was reading the book, Walter the Farting Dog, Banned from the Beach. And Ms. Divine was reading it to the dogs. Now, there happened to be one child that appeared to be in the room, but the rest of it were adults. But Miss Majesty Divine was cuddling the dogs and telling them about Walter and Walter's gaseous issues. Now, libs of TikTok picked up on this and accused Miss Majesty Divine of making sexual comments to children. Now, it seemed that Miss Majesty Divine at one point was telling a joke to the dogs and said, everybody likes a big bone. And that was deemed to be sexual innuendo and discussing penises in front of children. Ever since libs of TikTok posted that, the shelter has been receiving violent threats. They were talking about the threats they were receiving. The owners said that they would continue to operate as normal, but they made police and FBI reports. Giving an example of the type of message the shelter's been receiving, they shared a screenshot of an email with the subject line, "Burn in hell." You guys are total effing scumbags for hosting a drag show story hour for little kids. You sick Fs secretly want to sexualize little kids because deep down inside you're twisted and demented pedos who really want to F kids. I seriously hope that the next workplace shooting occurs at your organization and snuffs out everyone who approved of this. Maybe then our children will be safe from predators like you.
Does that go back to the whole thing of defining adult human female? That whole thing, remember, like they can't even define what a human is on the right anymore.
Yeah,
we have 7 minutes left, and we have 9 articles to go through. So we're going to have to keep it real tight here. We've got some big ones, and we've got our happy ones at the end. So we need to move fast. I want to start with this one. Study finds LGBTQ plus youth coming out younger than ever.
Yep. So any LGBTQ youth who were between 13 and 17-year-olds are more likely to have come out around the age of 13, whereas those who are slightly older, 18 to 14, reported coming out at 16. So there's a few years of difference. Okay. The next article is the substantiation of that.
Okay. The Trevor Project study, yes.
Yep.
An anti-LGBT group threatened to sue writers for defamation. The ACLU is standing up for them. What's going on here?
Now, this is actually a little bit too nuanced to do in a short, quick thing, but an anti-LGBTQ plus group wrote some things, got smacked down for it. Then they hired the ACLU to defend them. Now, if you're keeping up with things, the ACLU is also the primary defenders of trans rights in the country right now, taking on cases and filing for them so that we can get those to court. But keep this in mind. The American Civil Liberties Union is there to fight for everybody's civil liberties. And that means that it doesn't matter if you are LGBTQ positive or anti-LGBTQ. If you feel like your rights have been threatened, call the ACLU, see what they think on this.
Oscar Isaac wants to compete on Drag Race and says he was doing drag at a very early age.
That right there, I think is all you need to hear. Somebody said, would you ever grace the stage of Drag Race as a judge or maybe a contestant? And he said, yeah. And yeah. So, I mean, come on. Oscar Isaac on the stage of Drag Race? Absolutely. I was doing drag at a very early age and my sister named me Raisin.
I love me some Poe Dameron, so I love this. Wasn't a huge fan of Moon Knight, but loved his acting in it. U.S. launches promising human rights reporting tool. What's that tool?
So the State Department's Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor launched a new reporting tool called the Human Rights Reporting Gateway that gives the public a way to alert the U.S. government of gross violations of human rights. The State Department hopes the information uploaded will help staffers to determine which foreign security forces should not receive U.S. assistance. So these are for things around the world where U.S. citizens are being abused by foreign security forces.
How right-wing media promoted Florida's Don't Say Gay legislation. What's this article about?
Mostly it is based upon nearly 900 pages of analysis of documents that were acquired through public records request. And it demonstrates that libs of TikTok was very instrumental and possibly, a huge influence in getting the Don't Say Gay bill passed.
The amount of power that's scary that they wield.
Yep.
Mexico votes to ban all conversion therapy, a historic advance in human rights.
So not only did Mexico see one state approve marriage equality, now they have banned all conversion therapy. And this 69 lawmakers voted for it, 2 against. There were 16 abstentions. So a great overwhelming win for LGBTQ plus people in Mexico.
Oh, that's so awesome to see. I like seeing Mexico in the news doing some really positive stuff, despite all the negative things that are always said about Mexico. The Trevor Project, staying in Mexico, launches services in Mexico. What's going on here? What services are they launching?
Trevor Project is moving its free, confidential, 24/7 crisis services for LGBTQ plus youth into Mexico. I just went on to Trevor Project's website last week, and they are currently looking to hire 4 people to respond to calls from LGBTQ plus youth in Mexico. So they are expanding what they've been doing in the U.S. and they're trying to take it south of the border.
That's amazing. It's such an important service, and it's sad to see how strongly under attack they are here. I wonder what will happen as they move down there. It's it's hard to tell from political advances what the general population feels about something. We'll have to see. The campaign to rebuild the UK Trans Memorial is underway after a devastating fire and shows that trans people will always be here. This is wonderful. We reported on this monument being damaged in a fire during Pride, I believe it was, over there in the UK. Yeah. And it's nice to see that this will be rebuilt.
Exactly. And, this was, at first they were like, we don't know if we can keep this because it's so structurally damaged. Mm-hmm. But now they are actually going back and they're looking at the possibility of doing something to create, in some way, a new memorial or to convert the memorial that they have to be able to bring back that, bring back that marker that says trans people have always been here. We're always going to be here, and you can fuck off because you can try to burn us, you can piss on us, but we're still not going away.
Lovely sentiment. I love it. We're here. We're queer. We're not going anywhere.
Yep.
All right. Well, after all of that, we finished with a minute early. So good job, Genevieve. Well done.
I can do
anything else you want to add in the last second here?
No, not at this time, I don't think. But okay. I do want to say this. Elections are coming up. If you've not registered to vote, see if you can still do it. There may still be time. If you are registered to vote, get your information, get your ballots, know what you're voting on, know who you're voting on, and get out there and make a difference in this fucking world.
Yes. And one thing that we haven't talked about, and I'm going to run us a little bit long on this because I think it's really important. People feel like if we don't win, that our vote didn't matter. And I don't believe that's true. Even if you're in a very gerrymandered district, your vote still matters because the numbers still matter. The numbers add up to show where people are and what they feel about certain issues. And so the more numbers we have, the better it is for us. Those numbers still get tallied. Even if we don't win, again, because our districts are so gerrymandered that there's no chance we can win, the numbers are still important. So show up and have yourself counted. Get your voice out there. All right. For Genevieve Bergman, for Kari Aiden in the production booth, I'm Emily Michelle, wishing you good night and good news. Thank you so much, everybody.